Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today to this joint ICE and CIRIA presentation. So Louise has joined us today from CIRIA. She's the project manager on a number of projects, but notably some of the water-sensitive design projects they worked on. I think actually I'll just keep it short and sweet and hand over to you straight away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Firstly, thank you, Jack, for inviting me, and from CIWEM and ICE for inviting us along today. So maybe a little bit of my background of why I'm interested in water-sensitive urban design, and luckily that interest has grown as I've been working at CIRIA. So I did urban design masters, and during that masters I focused on water, and I focused on how water can be the main aspect in the urban design process, how it affects the way you lay out buildings and all the infrastructure associated with it. So really my interest started at university, and then luckily somehow I encouraged Paul Schaffer to do this project after a bit of work with other people in the industry, and now here we are with some outputs from there. So today really I'm going to give you a little bit talk about water in the city and our relationship with it. I'm sure you all have an understanding of that, but I just thought I'd go back to basics slightly. Then I'm going to talk about water-sensitive urban design as a concept, and then give you a little bit of an overview about the CIRIA scoping study, what we did, and our next steps, in the hope that you will read the 130-page document. When did it start? When did our relationship with water start? Well, it's nothing new. It started at the beginning of time. Cities grew up around water resources. They needed them, they needed to be close to them, they used them for drinking water, for bathing, for washing, for transport. So our relationship has always been very, very strong with rivers and watercourses. So this concept is nothing really new, it's just about the way that we manage it. So as our cities have grown, we've stopped thinking about the water cycle, and we've started to think about everything in silos. So we think about drinking water, and we think about stormwater, and we think about the rainwater, and we look at wastewater and floodwater, and we don't really link them enough. So this is what water-sensitive urban design is trying to do, and this is a nice natural landscape, and as we develop on it, our cities grow. We put more and more pressure on our water resources and on our watercourses, and so the natural water balance changes. And as you can see from the middle slide, the middle picture, precipitation stays the same, but then we have larger volumes of poor quality runoff, we have wastewater discharge, we have less reduced infiltration. So you can see that there's a lot of pressures on our cities, and so what the water-sensitive urban design is about bringing that balance back. The approach is to create more green infrastructure in the environment, and to really join up the water cycle. So why is it important in cities, and why are cities key to this? They're important because water will be the greatest challenge in the future. Currently in the economic forum, it's the third biggest challenge for the world. It keeps moving up and down, but it's the third at the moment, I believe. And as we grow as a society and as population increases, more and more people are going to live in cities. So we need to really face this challenge at a city scale. And 50% of our 80% of our built environment will be here by 2050. So we really need to think about how we manage it in our current urban environment. So this is talking about what we're trying to get to, and what we're trying to get to is water-sensitive cities are the outcome, and water-sensitive urban design is the process. So it's the urban design process that is the important factor here. It's about getting water early on in the discussions, and about putting it as a central part in the design process. whether that's a new build or whether that's actually retrofitting and thinking about things differently, and really trying to get us to link up the water cycle much better. So this is the transition to water sensitive urban design from Melbourne. They've done a lot of work on this, and they've looked at how we transition from the beginning when we, as I spoke about earlier, where we're about a water supply city, how we then go into a sewered city, then we go into a drained city, and that's roughly what the UK is between a drained city and a waterway city. And then as we move into a more holistic viewpoint and we look at the water cycle city, and we really start to think about linking everything up before we go into a water sensitive city. So Australia's not there yet either. So what is the WSED vision? And it's not just about water. Water is the key aspect here, but it's also about the multiple benefits that it can bring. So the ecology, that it can help improve the microclimate, so that reducing the urban heat island effect. It's also about play and leisure and bringing people together and community engagement. And then it's also about things like energy generation, energy efficiency and material efficiency. All of these things are going to be bigger pressures for us as we move on into the future, and energy and materials become more and more less and less of a resource, and we need to think about them in different ways. So I'm going to talk to you about extreme weather now. I'm not talking to you about climate change. We've been discussing this quite a lot within CIRIA, and how we use the term, and people have different viewpoints on climate change, but I think there's a general understanding that we are experiencing more extreme weather. So the recent events, over Christmas and in January, showed that there are extreme weather events occurring, and also into the future we are going to experience more drier periods, more drought, possible other aspects like fires, wildfires. So just to give you a little bit more about the drivers behind this, as you can see from that table, these extreme events have been happening for the last 10 years. It's nothing new. In each of those years there's been something extreme that has happened, whether it be a heat wave, whether it be a flooding event, whether it be storms, a drought, even snow and ice. So this is one of the key drivers. We need to think about what those extreme weathers are going to be, the pressures that they put on our urban environment, and think about how we can manage our water more effectively. But also there are other drivers. So water quality is a big driver, and we need to think about that, how we can improve our river courses, water usage as well, how we reduce our water usage. Currently at the moment we don't really value water. Lots of people I'm sure none of you do, but lots of other people leave the tap on. They just don't understand it. They don't understand the value of water because they pay so little for it. But as we move into the future, and especially with increased population, we need to think about using less. And then obviously there's the carbon surrounded with water generation and managing our wastewater. So also, what are the drivers from the urban design point of view? And this is really about our microclimate and managing our weather at a local level, so that we can, when those extreme heat events occur, we don't feel it's so hot in the urban environment. It's about things like green infrastructure, and also it's about connecting people with water. It's about us valuing it. It's about getting people back to understanding the multiple benefits, so community engagement, and it's about really connecting people together. So this diagram was from Clean Water in Australia. Why is CIRIA interested in water sensitive urban design? Why have we done this work? Well, for many years we've promoted sustainable water management, There's always the cycle of drought and flood, as I've spoken about. We've done work on water cycle studies. There's work going on water neutrality. There's other stuff in other countries, in Australia and in America, and so we wanted to learn from elsewhere and see how we could apply it to the UK. And you know, CIRIA is really about bringing people together. It's about bringing the engineers together and the landscape architects and the local government, and putting them all in a room and having some great discussions and some lovely arguments, and really trying to get to the crucial point of it all. And we really want to try to create more collaboration within the industry. So we decided to undertake the scoping study for water-sensitive urban design. There are three main outputs from this project. There's the 130-page document, which you can read. There is the animation, which you can just watch, and I was tempted just to play that and not actually talk, but I thought that would be a bit of a cheap date, so I thought you could all watch it on your way home. And then there's the ideas document, which is about getting it out to the community. It's getting it out to people so that they can learn about what water-sensitive urban design, and it's about getting it to the different communities. So we collaborated on this with the ICE, the Landscape Institute, the Urban Design Group and RTPI to get one document that they could all use and that they could all go out and talk to people and try to sell the concepts of water-sensitive urban design. So the start of the journey, where did it start? For us, for CIRIA and for the UK, we were all in a meeting room discussing a future proposal, future CIRIA project, and this future project was on a toolkit, a studs toolkit for urban designers. And Justin Abbott was in the room from Arab, and I don't know if any of you know him. He was kind of there, and he said to us, you know, what are we thinking about? If we're going to do this, we should be talking about the whole water cycle. And we all kind of looked at each other and thought, yeah, that was a bit silly. We should have thought about that earlier. So we quickly changed. We started to think about water-sensitive urban design and looking at Australia and how we could bring it over. So we then went out to our funders, and all of these people got behind us and bought into the idea and funded this project for us, and we're very thankful to our funders, because otherwise CIRIA wouldn't be able to do projects and create animations. And these were the objectives of the scoping study. It was really to find out and put water-sensitive urban design in the UK context. It was about engaging with people at different levels and understanding what they thought about it, how they could deliver it, gaining examples of where it had already been done. We also then did an extensive review of all the literature that is out there. And then we wanted to look at the opportunities and the barriers for applying it in the UK, and try to develop the business case. This is probably the hardest part of the project, the business case, and it's obviously still ongoing, and we're still trying to get examples, and really that will be something that will take years to keep developing. And then also develop a vision for WASUD and see how we could take it into the UK practice, and where it needed to come from, and how we were going to get it into developments, into our cities much more. So we held workshops. We held 3 workshops around the country, and really at these workshops it was about going back to basics, and it was about giving the participants the opportunity to really think about what a water-sensitive city could look like without any of the regulation or barriers that we deal with in our day-to-day lives. So we just gave them a blank piece of paper, and we said to them, They each had different scales to work at, whether it was a household, whether it was in a rural development, whether it was in a neighbourhood scale, and they really had to think about how this could be applied, and they were playing God, and they really loved it. We had some, I don't know if you can quite see, but I think it's this one, but we had some ducks in the central fountain, and people really started to engage with the idea. And the reason that we gave them this blank canvas was because we wanted people to explore the opportunities and be innovative and really think about how you could do it, so that hopefully when they went back to their desks, when they went back to their offices, they were able to, you know, start thinking about the principles and start applying them, and just, you know, think that there were the possibilities of actually achieving it. We then did a questionnaire as well out to the industry. And this was what the respondents were, who responded and where they were from. The reason that I've got this slide up is just to show you that they mainly were people within the industry. So they were water management professionals, or they were built environment professionals. So they had a current knowledge of this. So that's slightly, you have to take that in context when you look at the results. Okay, so how has water-sensitive urban design been applied elsewhere? And we really looked at all the different countries of what they were doing. So we looked at Australia, obviously, the concept came from Australia. It was a key part of our case studies. We then looked at America and Singapore. We looked at Germany, the Netherlands, and New Zealand. Really, when I was preparing this, I thought, actually, surely the Netherlands is the most water-sensitive city in the world, because if you look at it, and I was looking at a view of it on Google Earth the other day, and there's just canals and there's rivers everywhere. So surely that's what a water-sensitive city, that's the definition of it. Anyway, just to talk to you a little bit about Australia. Australia came from it. Most people probably think it's from a drought perspective, but actually their first driver was water quality. The reason for this was the state of their beaches. Their beaches are their main tourist area. It was causing a lot of problems, so they really they knew that they had to start doing something to improve it. They then experienced extreme drought, and then they've actually in recent years had flooding events. So they've really gone through the three main drivers, but it first came from water quality. And I like this picture because it explains a great story about how much the Australians really, when there was a drought, they really embraced the idea of saving water, and so the local communities would use their water from their showers, and they would flush it down their toilets because they knew that they had to, and they quite enjoyed it, and there was kind of community spirit around it. So I think when there was the need to, they had no problem. But if you went out to the public today and said that, there'd be uproar. So what were their solutions? So they installed a purple pipe system. So as you could see, this, I don't know if you can read that, but it says that it's recycled water, so do not drink. So they would use this water for washing their cars, for their plants, for their gardens, and it really showed how they could do it on a household scale. This is also a water tank in the back of someone's house, recycling the water from the roof, and then just simple measures like a planter where the rainwater falls off. It helps the microclimate, and it looks nice. And also it's an example of you don't need much space to actually manage water more effectively. So that's just some examples from Australia. Now I included this slide, and we didn't include this in the document, but this is one of my personal favourite examples of how we can really embrace water a lot more. And I'm sure most of you have heard about this, but if any of you haven't, then I'm glad that I included it. So in Sal, this was a road, a highway, a motorway. They built it because there used to be a shanty town there, and then it was really polluted. There was real problems within the city. So what they decided to then do was to turn it into, and there was a river underneath it, and they opened up that river and they created a great green space, a great urban park within the city centre. So that's a great example of how it really engaged the local people and how it's a great place to be now. And so, although we didn't use it as an example, I do really like it. Now, Hunters Point in New York. Again, this is not in the document, but it's something that's happened recently, and I heard about it at a conference recently. And when Hurricane Sandy hit New York, it devastated a lot of people. It caused a lot of problems. A lot of infrastructure and buildings were damaged by it. But Hunters Point is a park, an urban park that they built, and they just finished it before Hurricane Sandy. And the great story about this is that it was a buffer, so all the buildings behind it weren't affected by Hurricane Sandy. It really helped to save them. So ever since that, they've started to implement more parks, more green infrastructure in New York. So what's the application of water sensitive urban design in the UK? So 68% of our respondents they were familiar with the term, but they were saying that it was rarely applied in the UK. They said surface water runoff and attenuation was often covered, but other elements of the water cycle were neglected. And many of them said it was not considered a high enough priority in the planning and the urban design. How successful has the UK been applying the approach? Well, really it's been about SUDs and it's been about water butts. So, not greatly successful. This was the results from our survey. But there were obviously projects where it has been happening, and we have these case studies in the document, and also Wales are doing some great examples of it now. And I must caveat this because this research was done in 2012, so this was a few years ago now, so lots more is going on, and that's really what we want to build on as well. How good is the urban design process at integrating water? The UK process, sorry, not great. Usually, water comes in very late in the design stage. The engineers get brought in very late when it's outline planning application. And if we want to create a water sensitive urban design city, then we really need technical advice right from the very beginning. We need to have input right at the very beginning, and so that's when we can have the greatest influence. Challenges, particularly in the UK context. We looked at all these different challenges and we tried to prioritise the biggest ones. Understanding and cross-disciplinary working was identified as a big problem. Lots of people like to work in their areas, and sometimes it can be difficult to create collaboration. There was no economic incentive. Regulatory requirements were low, so these were the biggest challenges really. How well does WSUD interact with current legislation? Not very well. The questionnaire respondents said this. There's lots and lots of legislation out there that it could apply to, but it doesn't really encourage the use of water sensitive urban design. 40% or 42% of respondents believe that the regulation or the lack of it was a present barrier. the potential change from outputs to outcomes presents opportunities for more partnership working. So that's really looking at what the outcome is rather than what we're putting into it. Legislation does create barriers, but it can also create opportunities, so especially at a local level. And so when we were doing the scoping study, we really looked at water-sensitive urban design at the different scales, and it's really important to consider this when you're talking about water-sensitive urban design, because we need to. It's not just about the city scale; it's really getting it down to the household scale. We really wanted to understand what it meant for a house, what it meant for a neighbourhood, and what it meant for a wider city. So in the household, it's about using water-efficient utilities. It's about thinking about recycling your water into your toilets, and using things like water butts, possibly green roofs as well, and rainwater gardens. I mean, you couldn't do everything on one house, but these are just the examples of what you could do. You could apply different things to different houses. Then at a larger scale, a flat, it does start to become more about the environment around the building. So looking at a green roof, looking at making sure there's lots of green infrastructure, and then rainwater harvesting as well. And then what does the water sensitive city look like? That's really looking more holistically at the whole city, at what aspects you can integrate water sensitive urban design, and it's thinking about it at this scale, but also applying it at the smaller scale. So when we were looking at the benefits in the scoping study, there was we used these benefits, and we did a lot of work around this at the workshop, and we looked at these were the main benefits that we could apply to it, and we looked at what guidance was around and available for this. And for each of these within the document, there are some recommendations and there's some benefits that these different aspects can apply. And now talking about the business case for water sensitive urban design. This was quite a difficult part of the study because trying to develop a business case can be quite hard, and what we found is that the people that are putting the inward investment, so if it's a water company that are investing, they're not necessarily getting the outputs, it's other people that are benefiting from it. So when we were talking about it, it's about thinking about the whole life cost, and it's about thinking about who the other players are and how they can benefit. So the approach that was taken in the document was to look at different actors and see what their biggest investment would be in Wassad and what their biggest outcome would be. So this is a water company, and their biggest investment would be in water and wastewater, flooding, energy and carbon. That's where all their investment would come in. Whereas for a local authority, what they're interested in, the economy, health and well-being, flooding and place and community. So they're very different interests and investments that they're interested in. So if you put them together and they work together, then their outcomes would be much more multi-beneficial. So this was really the principles that we found in the scoping study. It's necessary to consider the whole life cost of water sensitive urban design measures and the process. There are benefits that can be direct, but also there are a lot of indirect benefits, and also thinking about funding that could support or share investment and risk. Because this was a scoping study, we looked at what the agents for change would be and how we could influence what different aspects needed to be pulled together to make sure that this is applied. So we came up with these these agents for change, so a presence of a coordinated body. We needed more evidence, guidance and training around water-sensitive urban design. We need champions as well. The best examples of water-sensitive urban design being applied is there's always a champion, whether it be in a local authority, whether it be in a water company, whether it be an engineer that's really championing this idea. And that's once they get people involved, once they get people engaged in it, they're the ones that take it forward. So we're really looking for more champions, and our PSG are always our champions, so they're out in the wider industry being the champions. We said that there was the need for supportive planning, design process and legislation, so really needed to connect the planners and the urban design process together. We need a trusted and reliable science and research about what scales, where it's best to apply it, how it can be applied, and the evidence base around that. And fostering environmental expectations, so this is about making sure that we're linking it to other environmental aspects, making sure that it's not just about water. And then strategic funding and incentives for making this apply at a larger scale. And then we did this route map, which I know you can't see, but I just wanted to show you that we had all of those agents for change along here, and then we had short, medium and long-term objectives of when they should be applied, or when we should start to try to get them implemented. So it shows that not all of these things are going to happen straight away, but it's about taking it, building up the evidence base, bringing people along, getting champions, and then in the long term, hopefully there would be the outcomes. So what's next? We've been having quite a discussion about this recently within CIRIA, and this is what we suggested in the scoping study. It's about connecting the water cycle. It's about collaboration. So it's about bringing people together, discussing it, getting them around and understanding the concept. And then it's about creating these great places to live. It's about creating places that then can be great case studies and people can go and see and experience. And then that's what equals water-sensitive urban design. So what's next for CIRIA? Well, this is just the start of the journey for us. This was only a scoping study, and the idea was that we would take it to full guidance document. But through the scoping study, we realised that probably wasn't the best approach. Actually, what we needed to do was build up the community. We needed to go out and have a lot more workshops, and a lot more events, get other people talking about it at conferences, getting case studies developing, maybe doing some webinars, even maybe a Twitter storm, who knows, and helping develop policy for planners as well, because they really need to understand how to get it into their local plans. So we're thinking that it's really more about a community, bringing people together who are interested in this, helping them to become champions, and so that we can disseminate the word, the idea and the concept further out, and so people can start really taking this back to their offices and applying it. But CIRIA is always interested in talking to other people and engaging with them, and so we hope that this is a conversation that can start today and we can carry it on as well. So that's it from me. So if you have any questions or any points, then please let me know.
If anyone has any questions, I'd like to open the floor to questions now.
We have tried to engage with the house builders. CIRIA is always trying to engage with the house builders. On every project, this question always comes up. The project steering group always wants us to engage with them. Unfortunately, they're a little bit hard to engage with. They often they often don't turn up to our meetings, even though we invite them onto our project steering groups. We do have conversations with the National House Builders Federation, but yeah, we know that they're a key. We know that they're key, and we try to engage with them, but unfortunately, they can be a little bit difficult sometimes. I think if we had the answer to that, then that would be a multi-million-dollar question, and I would have a career set for life. But I think it's about what we talked about in the project was about trying to bring all the relevant players together and getting them to talk about it from their different viewpoints on what the benefits were for them. And that is very difficult. It's not easy, but as we change and things have slightly changed, so local authorities are now much more invested in health and well-being because they're now responsible for it. It used to be the NHS, but they're no longer. It's now the local authorities. So it's about putting those kind of drivers in place to help it. But yeah, it's a difficult one, and until we get the users and we get the people wanting this kind of environment, it is going to be a hard sell. Unless legislation does the work for us, but again, with this government, they're trying to legislate less, so it's difficult. But one thing is more extreme weather events, not ideal, but they do get people talking about it. They get people discussing it, and we've had a lot more people talking about it since things that have happened recently. So yeah, it's a slow process, and it's not going to be something that happens overnight, but it's slow, trying to get it into the people that are willing to listen, the house builders are willing to listen, and trying to enlighten them, and then hopefully it will become places that people want to live and that will add value. And metering is another one that we've looked at and we discussed within the project, but it's still not. I think we have to explore all of these options, but it's still not enough. It's never going to be enough, and never going to be a big enough incentive. It's about small steps, I think, and trying to do all that we can. So definitely an option, but I don't think it's going to be enough until we increase the value of water. Or I always think that we should just turn off water for a day and see how people survived. Then they would value it. We'd do an experiment on it, because once you take it away, then people understand how much they use it for everything. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, from a metering point of view, And when I was talking about valuing water, I wasn't just talking about metering as a way to do that. I mean, as in we don't have that connect with water of how we use it on our day-to-day lives. So I talk about that. That's when I mean value. Metering is a possible way for people to understand their water usage, but I understand your comments that it will depend on the different households on how much they use. And with we're using the term extreme weather because there are going to be these anomaly events that will push our urban environment to the extremes and will cause these flooding and droughts, and that's what we need to be thinking about when we're trying to manage it more holistically, of how we can manage it for these extremes. Whereas if we talk in climate change, people just can be sceptical about it, or they can just not really grasp it. Whereas if you talk to someone about an extreme event, you can kind of pin it down to examples, and then they can understand what we're trying to talk about. But I mean, CIRIA's not saying that it's going to go and change the whole behaviour of the whole of the UK. What we're trying to do is enlighten and talk to and collaborate with industry, so we can work together on this issue. You know, people in general is a big issue, but that's kind of out of CIRIA's remit. That's down to the local authorities, and in a sense, it's not us that's going to do a big campaign and change the opinion of lots of people. We did look at how they got there and what they did, but we didn't go into too much detail about it, and it is very different for the different countries, and the drivers are very different. So we did look at it, but we were trying to more so use it as examples of how it's being done and what's being done, rather than how they got there, because the story of how they got there is not necessarily as relevant because it's so different to what our story is. I didn't go down the route of going through all the different documents, all the different policies, because yeah, I mean, I could have had a discussion about this, and Paul has done an excellent slide recently about the timeline of when all these different documents came in and all the different drivers around them. But what I wanted to give you was more of an overview of what water sensitive urban design is. If you want that, that's all in the document. But it wasn't because DEF are dragging their heels. They are dragging their heels, but yeah, that's a discussion that I didn't think was necessarily relevant to trying to get the message out there. It's so difficult because there's so much bad feeling about standards now. They've been going on for so long, and nothing's really happening, that it's kind of become such a big joke that and when everyone kind of talks about them, it's not a good thing. I think it will help to change attitudes. I think once we do start to get it more common, people will realise the benefits. But that is one aspect of it. That's just us, and what we're trying to do here is really join up the whole water cycle. So it will help, but yeah, I think what we're trying to do is join up the whole water cycle, really think about how we can do that. Yeah, I mean, everyone's talking about we're talking about it, and water is on people's agenda a lot more. So we do other work in the industry, and everyone was talking about overheating and those aspects of climate change. Now everyone's coming to us and talking about water and saying how we can make our built environment more resilient to the pressures of water, which has really changed in the last few months. It wasn't such a big consideration. So yeah, I think the events do help but they keep it in the news for such a short period of time that then everyone goes back to their day jobs and we forget about it, and you know, we're the ones still working in it. And I think that's the whole idea, is this bringing people together and trying to make champions at different levels and bringing everyone together to discuss this and take it forward on different levels. That's really why we see it as more of a collaboration, a network, a sharing of knowledge, of bringing people together to do workshops and understand how we can take it forward, because that's what we see will be the biggest value, as opposed to a guidance document for engineers, which is that's only one target audience within this agenda. There's so many more that we need to make sure that we're trying to get out to all of them. I mean, yeah, water stress, the future. I mean, maybe it will change from our discussions about flooding at the moment to water stress this time next year. We might be in a drought, because the whole idea of water sensitive urban design is about trying to balance the two different aspects and bring them together, and not just talking about flooding all the time.
Take one final question. We've exhausted you all. Wonderful. Excellent. It's rare. We may just show our thanks again to Louise in a normal way.